Laudetur Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Saturday, February 20th, Pope Francis expresses his gratitude for the selfless efforts of doctors, nurses and other healthcare workers during the pandemic. Local churches around the world observe a day of prayer for victims and survivors of abuse. And research from a leading Mexican university casts doubt over the coronavirus facts and figures that are being shared in national media. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo. Pope Francis has expressed his gratitude for the selfless efforts of doctors, nurses and other healthcare workers in the midst of the ongoing coronavirus emergency. In a letter addressed to the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life, the Holy Father remembered those who have given their lives for others during this pandemic. Christopher Wells tells us more.
Pope Francis has recalled the generous and heroic work of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare personnel during the coronavirus emergency. The Pope's remarks come in a letter addressed to Archbishop Vincent Paglia on the occasion of a memorial service for healthcare workers who have died as a result of the pandemic. The event was organized by the Pontifical Academy for Life, which Archbishop Paglia heads, to mark the day set aside in Italy to recognize the service of healthcare personnel. The commemoration occurs on the one-year anniversary of the detection of the first case of COVID-19 in the country. The examples of so many of our brothers and sisters who have risked their lives to the point of losing them inspires deep gratitude in all of us and is a cause for reflection, the Pope writes. In the presence of such self-giving, the whole of society is challenged to bear ever greater witness to love of neighbor and care for others, especially the weakest. Pope Francis added, the dedication of those who, even in these days, are working in hospitals and healthcare facilities is a vaccine against individualism and self-centeredness, and demonstrates the most authentic desire that dwells in the human heart, to be close to those who are most in need, and to spend oneself for them. Pope Francis assured those taking part in Saturday's memorial service of his spiritual closeness, saying, I join spiritually with all those gathered for this significant commemorative event, and I greet you with my blessing. I'm Christopher Wells.
The Day of Prayer for Victims and Survivors of Abuse is observed on the first Friday of Lent by several bishops' conferences across the world. It is an initiative responding to Pope Francis's request to all the bishops' conferences of the world during the first meeting on the protection of minors in the Church held in the Vatican in February 2019. Father Hans Zollner, a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, spoke to Vatican Radio about progress made with regard to fighting abuse in the Church since that meeting. Robin Gomes reports.
According to Father Hans Zollner, who is also president of the Center for Child Protection at the Pontifical Gregorian University of Rome, prayer must always be linked to action in order to promote justice and to change the culture in the Church itself. He underscored the importance of common prayer, stressing that prayer becomes powerful when 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of Jesus. Public prayer, he said, is also a reminder that we must not flee from this plague, as the last 2 popes have urged. Regarding progress made against abuse in the Church in the past 2 years since the first international meeting on the protection of minors in February 2019, the Jesuit priest said the initiative has had some visible fruits and others less visible. Among the visible effects, he said, the most important is the legislation in the Church. In May 2019, the Pope promulgated the motu proprio Vos Estis Lux Mundi, a new law which points to procedures in the event that a bishop, a provincial or a general of a religious congregation does not carry out what he or she should according to the canonical norms because of negligence or cover-up cases of abuse. Later in December that year, Father Zollner said, the pontiff made the possession and disclosure of child pornography material punishable by raising the age of minors from 14 to 18. In addition, he abolished the pontifical secret linked with cases of sexual abuse. Among the less visible fruits, Father Zollner said, are those that mature in people's hearts. He said many of the Bishops' Conference presidents and representatives of religious congregations who attended the February 2019 meeting left Rome with a changed heart, with many of them acknowledging it publicly. The February 2019 meeting has generated a level of awareness regarding abuse in the local churches. Several bishops' conferences that did not admit they had the problem of abuse are now committed to fighting the plague. This awareness has grown not only among the hierarchy, but also among the simple faithful, Father Zoller added. I am Robin Gomes.
Pope Francis on Saturday received in audience Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. He presented him for approval the causes of several candidates on the way to sainthood. The Holy Father authorized the congregation to promulgate a decree on the miracle attributed to an Italian laywoman, clearing her for beatification. Among the 7 decrees on heroic virtues is an English priest. Pope Francis on Saturday also accepted the resignation of Cardinal Robert Sarra from the post of prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Also, the Holy Father has named Cardinal Mauro Gambetti as Vicar General for His Holiness for Vatican City, Archpriest of the Papal Basilica of St. Peter, and President of the Fabric of St. Peter. Cardinal Gambetti had served as General Custos of the Sacred Convent of St. Francis in Assisi from 2013 to 2020. He succeeds Cardinal Angelo Comastri, whose resignation from the positions was accepted by Pope Francis. In world news, Mexico's largest and most prestigious university is insisting that the real coronavirus impact and devastation is way higher than the government's statistics are either indicating or admitting. James Blears tells us more.
Mexico's official COVID-19 infection tally is now more than 2 million people. But the National Autonomous University, better known as UNAM, says its painstakingly researched and better documented data indicates an entirely different landscape, with a minimum of 17 million cases, but in the worst case scenario, it could exceed 53 million. UNAM specialists claim that this could add up to more than 178,000 deaths directly due to the pandemic. Mexico has very low testing rates for the virus and disproportionately focuses on severe symptoms rather than mild ones. Mexican health chiefs have already conceded that the numbers they're reporting are significantly lower than the likely bleak overall scenario. The National Institute of Public Health estimates that 31 million Mexicans have been infected, and that does not take December and January into account, when the virus here multiplied and soared. Health authorities say that hospital admissions have decreased since January, but in reality many people now won't go to hospitals, preferring to take their treatment chances at home. Less than 2 million imported vaccines have been administered so far. The population of Mexico is 126 million people. For Vatican Radio, James Blears reporting.
Russia's prominent opposition leader Alexei Navalny has lost an appeal against his jailing for violating the terms of a suspended sentence. Stefan Boss reports that the anti-corruption campaigner will have to serve more than 2.5 years behind bars.
This wasn't the day Alexei Navalny had hoped for. A Moscow appeal court upheld on Saturday a prison sentence imposed on the 44-year-old Russian anti-corruption campaigner and most vocal critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Judge Dmitry Balashov rejected Navalny's appeal of the February 2nd ruling by a lower court. It turned a 2014 suspended sentence on embezzlement charges into real jail time. The judge decided to count 6 weeks Navalny was under house arrest as part of the time served. Navalny heard that he will now be imprisoned for just over 2.5 years in a penal colony. The sentence stems from a 2014 embezzlement conviction that Navalny has rejected as fabricated. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled it to be unlawful and demanded his release. In January, Navalny was arrested when he returned to Russia after months in Germany, recovering from a nerve agent poisoning he blames on the Kremlin. Moscow has denied wrongdoing. Navalny was detained for violating parole conditions of the suspended prison sentence, such as regularly reporting to police. It was then turned into a custodial sentence. Navalny called the charges absurd, saying he could not report to the police while recovering from the nerve agent attack. In his words, "The whole world knew where I was. Once I'd recovered, I bought a plane ticket and came home." He was due in court again later Sunday in another trial, this time on charges of defamation for calling a World War II veteran a traitor after the man appeared in a pro-Kremlin video. Prosecutors have called for Navalny to be fined the equivalent of $13,000 in that case. Speaking from behind a cage's window in the Moscow appeal court, Navalny said he was an atheist before, but has come to believe in God. The married father of two added that his faith helped him face his challenges. He said he believed the Bible, saying that those who hunger and thirst for righteousness are blessed. And Navalny said he felt no regret in returning home. For Vatican Radio, I am Stefan Bos, reporting.
And finally, in his video reflection for Lent, Cardinal Blaise Cupich, Archbishop of Chicago, says we should live these 40 days of Lent as a time to reflect on how the Lord calls us to draw closer to Him and others, especially in these tragic times of loss due to the pandemic.
Once again, the season of Lent has arrived, but this year's Lent will no doubt mean something different for us in this moment of the pandemic. We have already given up so much, being with loved ones, enduring disruptions to our usual routines, not to mention, for many, the loss of incomes, jobs, and yes, the death of family and friends. We all have had significant losses. So maybe it is hard to imagine how we can embrace more self-denial right now. But let me suggest another approach. To consider that just as the usual practices of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving are all designed to bring us closer to and more dependent on God rather than ourselves, so too our moments of loss with the pandemic have done the same. What I'm suggesting is that we approach these 40 days as an invitation to intentionally reflect on how the Lord has been calling us to draw closer to each other and to Him in our suffering, in our loss, imposed by the pandemic, but also to think about how what we have learned in this year-long Lent should bring about changes in our lives after the pandemic. Just as Lent calls us to be different, to change, does not the pandemic, the imposed sacrifices we have undergone, also call us to change in our relationships with one another and our God? If we do this, Lent in 2021 will help us recover our basic trust in God and our compassion for others. We will change and be renewed. Not only will Lent have a new meaning, but so will Easter. God bless you all.
That was Cardinal Blaise Cupich with his Lenten message. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, please be sure to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also catch the latest updates on our Facebook page or on Twitter. Many thanks go to Patrizio Ciprari in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo.